Good evening. Welcome to Rock, Paper, Hand Grenades. I'm Joshua Solomon, and this is your host, the lovely Gary Hopper.
I
don't
realized.
think I've ever called you lovely before.
No, you haven't. No, it's just because we were talking on the way up the elevator, and I realized I'm kind of the eye candy of the show.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, Gary, I saw a new product on Amazon today. It's a GPS for seniors.
Right.
Yeah. It'll tell you where to go and why you planned on going there in the first place.
Yeah, when you get there, it reminds you what the hell you went there for. So our host, probably host. That'd be probably smarter. Our guest today is Dr. Strang, who's MD, but he came to our attention on a what was it? What was the article? What was it?
So it was Gateway Pundit.
Gateway Pundit.
The Gateway Pundit, which is a news source, had interviewed Dr. Strang and concerning the anomaly of the voting counts in Windham, New Hampshire. And shortly after the article was fact-checked and then removed off of, or the recording of the interview was removed off of YouTube. So there was some canceling of Dr. Strang's comments, and we thought we'd give him a chance to talk to us.
Did you talk about COVID or something? Is that why they canceled it?
No, we talked about the verboten topic of potential voter fraud.
Do we have a list of verboten topics now? Because you can't talk about the vaccine and you can't talk about COVID and any other disposition as other than it's really scary and we're all going to die, so we need to wear a mask and hide in our basements.
Biden's dementia. Can't talk about that.
No, you can't talk about that. So now we're not allowed to talk. We can't talk about voter fraud.
Yeah. So a little bit more to the story. So I got a couple of photographs here, or a couple of screenshots rather. As a screenshot, we tried to give the Gateway Pundit's article a little bit of exposure on our Facebook page, and
it looks nice.
We got fact checked. Right, so we got fact checked, so we're not allowed to even talk about the recount in Windham, New Hampshire. And when we got fact checked, so if there's another screenshot of the actual headline, not that one.
That's not good.
Yeah, that's a little bit too zoomed
it's almost
in. So this is
big enough for me to read.
This is the actual article that got fact checked, and the previous slide, which it didn't show up on the screen properly, was the actual last sentence of the fact check article, right? So that we got put up as a fact check. They covered up the article. They didn't want anybody to click on it, and they instead put up the link to the fact check article. And the fact check article went through a whole bunch of crap. Well, we contacted Dominion, and Dominion said there's nothing wrong with their machines. And we contacted this other fact-checking organization, and they said that there was nothing wrong. And the votes are certified, so there's no fraud. And but so it goes through this long tirade of double talk and double speak. The fact check article does. And in the very last sentence, it says, but yeah, this is an anomaly and it merits discussion and investigation. So the fact check actually says exactly what the article says, that we need to figure out what went wrong here in Windham. But they wanted to put the fact check up, hoping that people wouldn't read through the whole thing and realize, oh yeah, there really is something wrong here.
Well, in my mind, there's no need to check the facts. The facts are what they are. And they are that there were 4 races in the New Hampshire House of Representatives that were on the ballot in Windham on November 3rd. All 4 races were won by Republicans. The Democrat, Christy St. Laurent, lost by just 24 votes. And she asked for a recount, which is absolutely her right to do, and I fully support that. In New Hampshire, we do not do machine recounts. We do hand recounts because hand counting is universally felt to be more accurate than machine counts. The entire country of England, Canada, Australia do not use machines to count votes. They use hand counts
And we're not talking
only.
recounts.
Well,
They
Correct.
count by hand their original
Their
votes.
original ones, so
Yeah.
that they're not disputing this stuff 3 months later like we are.
Right.
So on the
Well,
Windham,
in fairness, so when we do a recount, they take the ballots that went through the machine and count those. So it's not like
by hand.
by hand. So it's not like we do have paper. The one cool thing about New Hampshire is we do have a paper trail.
Yes.
So the recount we can trust.
We can trust. And on that hand recount, all 4 Republicans gained on average 300 votes, which doesn't seem like an awful lot, but out of 10,000 votes, that's
a lot.
more than 6% of their original vote total. The woman who asked for the recount, the Democrat Christy St. Laurent, lost 99 votes, or 2.2% of her original total. Those swings between the initial machine and the subsequent hand recount are enormous. We've never seen swings like that here in New Hampshire. Even the Secretary of State said, we've never seen something of this magnitude. Now, there were all sorts of hypotheses that came out shortly after to explain this. Oh, these must have been 300 votes from the maskless voters because they had to vote in a booth over in the corner, and they must have forgotten those. No, the town clerk came out and said, we don't keep them all there till the end of the night. We bring them over hourly. We announce that, feed them through the machine. So the bottom line is when you have a recount that shows a massive increase in votes by 4 people all in the same party and a loss by someone in the opposing party, that really is highly suspicious of fraud. That's not a random error.
Oh,
If it
that's
were
right.
random, all those gains
it-
would have been peppered amongst the 8 candidates because
Right.
there were
It
4
should
Democrats
be,
and 4
spread out
Republicans.
statistically.
Yes.
And there's actually a law of statistics. I can't remember what it's named after the person who derived it. Statistically, there's a law that says if there's going to be this much of a reduction here, there has to be a certain percentage the other
Yeah,
way.
you're talking
If
about
there's-
Benford's law?
Yeah,
Yes.
that's what I'm talking about. These things cannot happen. It's almost. I mean, we are human and we do err, but
Correct.
over a large sample of pretty much anything, whether it's human or nature or whatever, there are rules that statistics have to play by. And so when you get one party losing a whole bunch of votes in a recount, right, and another party gaining a whole bunch of right, but nothing in between.
Correct.
That's the suspicious part. And what also gets me is the recount that was asked for was because there was a 24 vote loss.
Correct.
Right? She had lost by 24 votes. So
That increased to
any
almost
swing-
424
well, it
votes.
did increase to 420. But any swing of 24 votes in one way or the other
Correct.
can change. Just 24 vote swing would have changed the initial outcome.
Correct.
And so when we have a discrepancy that's 15 times that,
Correct. Yeah.
that's scary. But on the other side, if that were a Republican that lost by 24 votes, I think people would scream every time they ask for a recount.
No, that's not. really true.
Well, here's the thing. This is
No,
not
I've
a
just
partisan issue.
I've been
It's-
involved in recounts, and it's not like that.
This is not a partisan issue. What is at issue here is can we trust our voting machines? And when you have this type of a swing between the initial machine count and the subsequent hand recount that cannot be explained, then naturally people are going to say, I'm not sure if I trust our vote counting method. Do you know how many political contests are settled by 6% or less? Most of them.
Most of them.
Yeah.
So how do you, and I even posed this to the Secretary of State, how do you answer a candidate from any party who loses a race by 2% when they say, how do you know I didn't win by 4%? You can't answer them because they don't know what happened. And what's disgusting is they don't have any curiosity. When I was on a conference call with the Secretary of State, Bill Gardner, on December 10th, his response was, well, it didn't change the outcome of the election. I said, are you kidding? Is that it? Is that the end of your curiosity? What degree of difference is enough to stimulate you to investigate? 20%? 50%? Give me a number that would make you say, okay, this is too much, we now have to look at this.
Well, another thing that I think I might have lost my chain of thought.
At least you have chains.
I know what I wanted to ask. The curiosity part, that is puzzling, right? Because we see a lack of curiosity in a particular segment of the media right now for all kinds of different things. There's a lack of curiosity if it doesn't go with your way of thinking. But I know what I wanted to ask. This lack of curiosity, is it preventing investigating the machines? I mean, we've done a hand recount. We know what the actual paper totals are, right?
Correct.
Because we have that paper backup. A lot of states don't have that.
Correct.
But have we taken those votes and rerun it through the machine?
No, they haven't. And
That's what I wanna know.
What we want.
Is
well,
the
first
machine-
and foremost, if you have a discrepancy of 300 votes on average for every Republican candidate, how do you know that there weren't 300 ballots that were not run through the machines? Well, all you got to do is look at the total number of ballots you handled on the hand recount. They didn't record that. And I confirmed that with Karen Ladd in the Secretary of State's office, Betty Dunn, who was the assistant moderator for Windham, and that's how they pronounce it. They don't say Windham, they say Windham. She was at the recount, and she said they never totaled the number of ballots that they received. I mean, if I were running a recount, the first thing I would do is, you're dealing
Make sure the
with
totals add
ballots.
up.
There should be a chain of custody with these. On the truck today from Windham, we got 10 boxes of ballots containing 10,006 ballots, and they didn't do that. So they have no idea where this extra 300 votes came from. So we have an initial machine count, widely disagreeing with the subsequent hand recount. There's no disputing those facts.
But we don't know how many
we don't know
went
how many
through
ballots
either?
they handled. So the logical thing to do would be to rescan the ballots and see, okay, how many do you have and which count is correct? Was it the initial machine count or the subsequent hand recount? They don't
Well,
want to do it.
Well, they don't do that because they trust the hand recount.
Well,
So
here's the other
no,
thing.
no, I agree with you.
Yeah, but any investigation into criminal activity would have to include rescanning through the machine, right? I
Correct.
mean, we have to
Well, you would- yeah,
find
but
out
then you
what
would-
happened and why.
Then you would have
Was
to know
it the
which.
machine, or was it that we didn't actually run them through the machine in the first place?
Yeah, but you would have to know which machines they ran them through then, because I
Well,
think
there's 4 machines that Windham uses.
Yep.
Okay? Sorry, Windham. We know that the machine count initially does not agree with the subsequent hand recount.
correct.
I would assume that the Secretary of State certified the hand recount,
Right.
because why would you do that and then certify the erroneous initial machine count?
No, they always
So-
certify the hand recount.
Correct.
So.
So we have 2 that are widely different, and because they certified the hand recount, then obviously there's something wrong with the machine count. So the next most logical question is, was that the only race that was wrong? Were there other races in Windham that were wrong? And here's the other thing. There's only one voting machine that's used in the 85% of towns in New Hampshire that machine count, and it's called the AccuVote 2000. It's the only one that the Ballot Law Commission has certified for use in New Hampshire. If there is a problem with the machine in Windham, does that mean that there's a problem in the other 85% of towns that use that?
Well, they did.
We don't know.
Well, they not necessarily. So they, excuse me. So I've been involved in recount personally. I think in 2004, 2004, I lost my election by 6 votes, and I was there at the hand recount, and it went up to 7. Okay, so I've seen the process. I know how it works, and it's pretty thorough and actually pretty amazing.
With the hand recounts.
Hand recounts. So, well, because to play devil's advocate, there were I think 16 recounts in the state, and Windham is the only one where there was really this great
And I looked
mess
at
up.
all of those,
Yep.
and there's when you do a hand recount and compare it to the initial machine count, there's always some background noise. There'll be some adjustments up and down for every candidate. But typically they're, depending
or
upon the number of
yeah,
votes
few
that
votes.
are cast, they're, +5, -12.
Yeah, yeah.
They're minor changes.
And they're
even the
scattered.
other 3 Democrat candidates for those 4 House races in Windham, one I think gained 18, another one gained 21, another one gained 28. But Christie St. Laurent lost 99. The 4 Republican candidates gained on average 300. Those were clearly magnitudes greater than the
Yeah,
background noise that we
right.
saw with the other candidates in Windham.
Right.
So that has to be explained. We simply can't say, oh, well, it didn't change the outcome of the election, move on, folks.
Right.
We have to trust that the people who are holding office are the ones that we truly elected to office. If we don't have that trust, then our society is going to disintegrate very quickly, and I don't want to see that happen.
Does the town
Agreed.
of Windham intend to use the same machine in 2022?
No, they're going to be using it in about a month.
Okay.
Well, they have to use the same machine. The town actually owns the machine.
Well, I guess
So-
you see what I'm getting at, though.
Sure, but the way it works in our
Have we
state is that
discovered what the problem is?
the state doesn't mandate a town machine count versus hand count. 15% of towns decide to hand count. Dixville Notch has 5 voters. You don't
Right.
need a machine to count 5 votes. But 85% of the towns use a machine, and the machine that they use has to be certified by the Ballot Law Commission. And they've only certified the AccuVote 2000. Now, it's started being produced in 1989, 1990, so we're talking a 30-year-old plus machine that is not manufactured anymore. They're scavenging parts from other states, so they're not going to be around for very long. But the software, the memory boards that actually count the votes, whether it's a town election like we have coming up in March or the general election like we had on November 3rd, has to be changed. And so those boards that are in there now that have the data from the November 3rd election are about to be taken and exchanged for the town elections that are coming up in early March. And good gosh, folks, we're dealing with something that happened 3 months ago, and the people at state, whom we trust to make sure that our elections are free and fair and not tampered with, have been dragging their feet for over 3 months. So these ballots are sitting in the state archives after the hand recount, and nobody wants to look at them. Here's the bigger travesty. On July 17th of last year, Governor Sununu signed into law Senate Bill 283, which instructed the Secretary of State to conduct an audit, to look at high-speed optical scanners so that they could be used to audit the results of future elections to make sure that our vote counting machines were accurate. He was supposed to do that study by November 1st. He didn't do it. He didn't scan anything. They didn't even start doing requests for proposal until a week or 2 before November 1. That law expired November 1. And the Secretary of State scanned ballots from a Manchester race on November 30th, 29 days after that law expired. On what authority did he do that? If he had done his job, we would have these high-speed optical scanners and had them in place so that we could have looked at the Windham anomaly and settled it right away. So we have officials who are not doing their job, and here we are, we the people, are left in the dark about, did we really get the outcome that we voted for?
So what is the explain to me what the high-speed optical reader does.
It actually audits.
Do you take all the ballots and run it through it and gives a
Correct. Yep. You would actually take the ballots, run them through the scanner, and it's designed to audit, not recount. Only a candidate can ask for a recount, and you only get one. So, if you had lost your race by 6 votes before and the recount showed that you lost by 7, you can't say, "Oh, I don't believe that one either. I want a second recount."
Yeah,
you only get one.
Yeah, I know.
So this would allow us to audit randomly if you want to do that. Some states do random audits just to make sure that the vote counting machines are indeed accurate. But it would allow us to verify the results that are being reported in various towns on various elections. Why would you pass such a bill? Why would Governor Sununu sign it unless there was some doubt about the accuracy of our vote counting machines? So this was supposed to do a study, And he was supposed to report to the Ballot Law Commission, the House, and the Senate the results of this study, which was supposed to be completed by November 1, 2 days before our general election.
Right.
He didn't do it.
Yeah.
The first audit, the first scan that they did was 29 days later after the law had expired. So if he had the authority to do it then, why not scan the Windham ballots? And,
Right.
and they won't do it. They're just sitting there with nothing being done.
I think that goes back to the, you know, lack of curiosity, right? It doesn't change the outcome, so why are we going to do it? We trust the hand recount, which is perfectly fine to trust the hand recount, but I'm curious as you know, these machines are getting older. You've got a machine that or a set of machines that obviously didn't do what they were supposed to do in the general election, and they're about to be used again.
Correct.
And we're going to take those machines' results verbatim unless a candidate asks for a recount. And aren't there rules for asking for a recount? I mean, if I get 10 votes and my opponent gets 20,000, am I allowed to ask for a recount?
Yeah, yes, you are.
You can, but it's going to be costly.
Yeah.
Because I
Right.
believe it's less. If it's less
Well,
than
well,
one
that's
half
the
of
thing.
1%, they do it for free.
There's a financial cost to
Yes.
recounts as well, right? So
Yeah, well, you
there's a hurdle that we would have to jump in order to force these machines to be recounted, right? To recount against the machines and say, hey, we don't trust the machine anymore.
Correct, but in the March elections that are coming up, you might have a school board race or a town selectman race, but those are also going to be used to count ballot articles, warrant articles. You know, how much do we want to spend on the school system? How much do we want to spend on our town government? There's no candidate at stake there. So I'm not sure how you could even ask for a recount
Right.
of a warrant article, which is going to look at, do you want to spend money?
I believe somebody can. In other words, if I had my heart set on getting a new cruiser for the Ware city, for a city, right, town, and it was within 10 votes or something like that, I'm sure that there's somebody has the authority to ask for a recount if it's within a reasonable range. But like you said, in this case in Windham, it was only the one Democrat who was within that window.
Correct.
So nobody would have, if she was, 50 or 60 votes back, we wouldn't even know that happened.
Correct. Now, here's the greater travesty in my mind, is that she appealed that recount to the Ballot Law Commission, which met, I believe, November 23rd, and unanimously agreed to have the Attorney General look into this. They won't do it. The attorney for the town of Windham, Bernard Campbell, wrote the Attorney General on November 19th asking for an investigation. He never responded to him. He, being Gordon MacDonald, never responded to the town attorney. I got involved with Senator Gaida on this issue and wrote a 9-page letter to Attorney General MacDonald, complete with graphs and statistics. It was ignored for weeks. Finally, Senator Gaida got so outraged, he called them up and said, what are you doing? You have all these people that want this investigated. And finally, we got a meeting with him on January 4th and a follow-up meeting on January 6th. We were told he has no legal authority to investigate this. Well, baloney. If you go to newhampshire.gov, look up RSA 7:6-C. RSA stands for Revised Statutes Annotated. It's New Hampshire law. 7:6-C, the very first sentence says, the Attorney General, in response to a letter of complaint, such as mine, or on his or her own initiative, can, in their discretion, investigate things to make sure that there has been no violation of election law.
So
Well-
I think their thinking is that they don't have in front of them a crime, right? Because it didn't change the outcome of the vote. The hand recount shows that the votes were, that the candidates that won are the candidates that won. And so they're thinking,
Right.
no big deal. It didn't change anything, so there's really no crime to investigate. But the problem that I have with this is this machine. You talked about these machines having these boards that need to be changed out for
Correct.
each cycle that they count, right? The machines are counting machines, but every time you go out, walk into the ballot box, you have a piece of paper that has different names in different locations and different ballot measures, whether it be warrant articles or whatnot, in different locations on this piece of paper. So the machines have to be programmed to detect those dots in the specific locations
Correct.
for those specific questions, right?
Correct.
And so you have to program those boards to say, okay, for this cycle, this is what the ballot looks like, and this is what you're counting. And you're going to put these dots into this category, and these dots down here go in here, and these dots over here, they go into this category, right? You have to program the machine. During an election where there are candidates involved, that would be the place where you might see some nefarious work, right? I'm not saying that it actually took place, but it's candidates versus candidates. That's when you might see some fraud going on in the programming of how the machine is going to count this next batch of paper that comes through. In the March election, it's going to be warrant articles. Like you said, there's not going to be any candidates on there. So
Unless it's selectmen or school board.
so if they pull those boards out, right, and then they put the new boards in that are programmed for this new set, right, there's less interest in fraud in this cycle, in this March cycle, than there would be in a general election.
Correct.
So the probability that someone is fraudulently programming these things for one of these town elections is very low. So what was going to happen is we're going to have this a town election. They're going to scan through all of these ballots, and then they might do an audit just for the sake of auditing because of all this publicity. And the audit's going to match perfectly with the machine counts, and they're going to say, machines are fine.
Yeah, but you're
Right.
not auditing the election that we know has a problem.
Exactly. That's
You
exactly
don't
what I'm
have to
getting
have
at. Why
evidence of
aren't they
fraud.
doing that? Why
Right.
isn't that happening? Because those boards that are in there now, the ones that are programmed for the general election ones, those are the ones that have the potential to have been fraudulently programmed.
Right. We don't know if this was fraud. It's highly
That's
suggestive
why I'm
of it
saying.
because
That's why I'm
all
saying
of
we
the
don't know,
gains-
but we need to investigate.
Right.
But no one seems to want to.
all of the gains are by Republican
exactly what the
candidates.
Attorney
The
General
losses
needs to
are
do.
by Democrat candidates. That's a split that you really have to say, in my opinion, this is fraud until proven otherwise. If it were a random error, if there was something mechanically wrong with the machine or a software programming error, it would distribute those votes randomly amongst the candidates on the
necessarily.
ballot. So we don't know if it's fraud yet, but you have to look. You don't have to have evidence of that to look. If you're the chief of police in town and someone calls you up and says, I haven't seen my neighbor in 3 weeks and there's a foul smell coming from an open window in their house.
Well, that's not evidence.
If you send an officer to their door and they ring the bell and no one answers, would that be acceptable to just leave and say, nobody home, no one answered? No, you have to investigate further. Is it they haven't taken their garbage out for 3 weeks and there's a chicken carcass in there? Or are they dead on the living room floor and decomposing? You have to look.
And that's what
here
we don't
have the
know right now.
largest unexplained difference between a machine count and a hand recount in the history of New Hampshire. And we can't get our elected officials to want to look. That is inexcusable.
Well, the thing is, I don't necessarily agree that it has to be programming, because if you look at the ballots, they're it's always like, one side's Republican and one side's Democrat. So it could have been like one of the machines has a sensor that's malfunctioning.
Yes, it could.
Absolutely.
It
So,
could.
but
But
we
we
don't know
don't
that.
know until we
No, I
look.
agree. We don't. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that it's not to jump to the idea that somebody programmed that board incorrectly is
Well, I guess that's what I'm
but
saying.
we should know.
There's
we
a
should,
very easy way to solve this. First and foremost, you scan the ballots that are sitting in the archives and you determine how many ballots did we actually recount by hand, okay? And that's what we need to know. Because if it agrees with the 10,006 ballots that Windham said they fed through their machines, okay, we know that there aren't extra ballots that snuck in.
Don't you have a readout of or a
And
printout
there should be a
of
counter right on the corner of that machine, too,
no
right?
on
There are
each one of
tapes
them?
from the machines, but they didn't count the total number of ballots. They subjected to a hand recount on November 12th. They didn't do that.
Oh well, that's
That's inexcusable.
right.
You ought to know how many ballots you handled. Once you do that, and you know, okay, it's the same 10,006 ballots that Windham sent to us, then you look at, okay, what's the count from that audit, from that scan? If it's the same as the hand recount, we know we got a machine problem. So then the question is, well, what did the machines report for presidential, senatorial, DC House races? Were those accurate? And if they're wrong, well, then we got a bigger problem here. Now, you can take all 10,000 ballots and run them through machine 1, machine 2, machine 3, machine 4, and if they all agree, wonderful, we're finally getting some continuity here. But if the machines are still reporting the same erroneous results that we know are not accurate, then we got a machine problem.
Right.
And we don't know why, though. I mean, machines only do what humans instruct them to do.
I know that.
So if they're wrong, was it an accidental error or was it an intentional error? We just know that there's an error right now because we've got a hand recount that doesn't even come close to what the machine count
We
was.
also I was talking to Bill Gardner today because before I did the show, I wanted to talk to him to get a different perspective, and he said they're still looking into whether or not, because each machine, they're supposed to run a bunch of sample ballots through at before the election.
Correct.
And he hasn't found out if that was done yet. No, in other words, he hasn't got. I don't think he has evidence that that was done prior to the election. Like who was responsible and what were the results and things like that. Because
I
they are
believe that
supposed.
has to be done by protocol
Right.
for every municipality that uses a machine to
Yeah.
count. And they keep records of that. After we met with the Attorney General on January 6th, they asked for a ton of paperwork from Windham. And I believe that was in that stack. And most of that request was already sitting in the offices in Windham, so it was satisfied immediately. So I
Right.
don't believe that that is still outstanding.
Okay.
I could be wrong, but that's something that every municipality that uses a machine to count
Yeah,
would
because
have.
they have to make sure that they're running correctly before
Correct.
the election.
Correct.
So one thing that stands out as I suspect fraud, right? One thing that stands out that can lead to evidence of fraud is, so we have this situation where we have 300 votes, almost exactly 300 votes missing from 4 candidates that
300
showed up
apiece.
each that showed up during a recount.
Correct.
So could that be 300 ballots that simply weren't scanned by the machines?
Possibly.
Possibly, but we don't know. But on the other side of that, we have another candidate who came within 24 points of, or 24 votes of winning the race, lost by 24. In the recount, she lost by much more.
99 votes.
That tells
In
me
addition.
that the machine magically made up 99 votes that she didn't have to begin with.
Right.
I can see a machine missing 300 votes because we didn't scan them in.
Correct.
But where did 100 votes suddenly come out of nowhere
That's an excellent
and
point.
then disappear during a canned recount?
And if you look at the other...
That's the part that kind of scares me, is that the machine made up 99 votes.
Right. And if you look at the other recounts that were done, I think you said there were 16 done for this election, and I think that's correct. There are a couple of candidates, might have lost a vote or 2 votes, but not 99 votes. Again, this is a difference of a much higher magnitude, and it has to be explained. It cannot be allowed to be dismissed by it didn't change the outcome of the vote. Not this vote, not this election, but
Right.
what about the other elections that are...
And what about the next one?
Yeah, and what about the next one? If we can't trust our machines to be counting accurately, well then, folks, we ought not to be using machines anywhere in New Hampshire.
So we have about 20 minutes left. I think all 3 of us want to talk about something that's kind of close to us. Something we didn't expect to be talking about today, but we knew it was coming. And that is, we lost a great American today. And we have a couple of pictures we want to throw up. And this one, we want to remind everyone that Mr. Rush Limbaugh has received the Presidential Medal of Freedom, being given to him by former First Lady Melania Trump there. And we have another one. This is Rush behind the famous golden EIB microphone. This was inarguably, I don't think anyone can argue, the greatest radio host with the largest radio audience in the history of radio.
What do you have? It's like 70 million? Something like that, right?
In the 90s, it was 20 million listeners a week, which is massive. And it's only grown since then.
Yeah.
But Rush died due to stage 4 lung cancer. He finally succumbed to it today. One of the greatest Americans. And I think I've personally been listening to Rush since I was 17. I was still in high school when he went national. I always lamented the fact during school that he was on during school hours, and I couldn't listen to him during the school year. But every summer, I was listening to him, or a day off, or a snow day. He was on my radio. I was listening to him. So I got a 30-year relationship with Mr. Limbaugh myself.
I know that one of the things that I think are people might misunderstand about Rush Limbaugh is because they hear, if your only information about him is from the media, it's that he had these people that were like minions who just hung on every syllable that came out of his mouth. Actually, it's really completely the opposite. I didn't really listen to Rush Limbaugh because I worked in a tool room, and it would be pointless to try to listen to talk radio in a tool room because it's too much noise, and everybody would yell at you for listening to the talk radio. So I didn't really listen to Rush Limbaugh until I was booted out of work because of my eyes in 2012, and I think, like me, I think a lot of people who listen to Rush Limbaugh had the same experience. It wasn't like Rush was articulating something new, and I'm just sitting there dumbfounded by how brilliant he was. It was that he was articulating things that I already believed, but doing it better than I did.
Exactly.
So it was...
That was a gift that he had.
Yeah. So, like, I started listening to this. Wow, I didn't know anybody else believed this. And it was just so brilliantly presented. And I'll give you an example. So when I'm on Faceplant or doing any social media, Rush would say something during the day. Well, I can't put on Facebook, Rush Limbaugh said, because 80% of the population believes that he's some sort of degenerate because of all the fake news over the years. So I would always go to and find the article he referred to and post that, because I found that over the years of all the people I ever listened to, when I double-checked his information, because I did it a lot, I always try to keep an eye on things, he was right all the time. I can't remember an instance where he said X, and I went to check it, and it was false. He was always... So the relationship between his viewers and himself wasn't that we were just sitting there, just following him blindly. It was that he was saying things that we thought, and he said it better than we could, and came up with facts to support it.
Yeah, and he's also one of the reasons why we always tell you, don't just listen to us. Go find the evidence for yourself. Go look it up yourself. Yeah. He taught us to do that, and we're teaching you to do that. And you bring up a good point about Rush and the facts that he said. It was something that you could trust. You could trust almost every single word out of his mouth. In the early 90s, what today would be called fact checkers, they started to, the CNN and the mainstream media back in the early 90s started to try and do this to him, started to try and disprove to him. And the statistics came out, and he started to tout them on a regular basis, just to needle them. The statistics came out. He was like 99.8% correct.
Oh, is that where he came up with that?
Yeah.
From? Oh,
that's those are real numbers. Those
were
real numbers.
Oh, I thought he was just being a wiseacre.
He wasn't. Those were real numbers.
He was very prescient. He had the ability to read the political landscape better than anyone I have ever seen. And and would be able to predict things that would happen sometimes 6, 8, 10 months down the road. And in fact, today, after they announced his passing, they were actually playing clips from prior shows where he was saying, I think you're going to see in 6 months, 8 months, this will happen. And he was right. I mean, it's interesting. You mention all these people who can't stand him. If you engage those people, do you know how many of them will actually ultimately admit they've never listened to him?
Exactly.
They just parrot he's
anyone
an
who
idiot,
makes
he's
a comment
racist.
like that,
Yeah.
anyone who makes a comment like that to me, they have never listened to a show front to back.
Yes.
You listen to one show and you realize that this man is not blowing smoke up your ass. Right?
I started,
Up your butt. Sorry,
I started
Brendan.
listening to Rush in the late 90s, and in those 23 or 24 years, I had the pleasure, the honor of talking with him on his show, I think 4 times, most recently.
I never got through.
A little over
You're
a year.
big jerk.
Well, you had to be persistent. I can't tell you how many times I had to call in 10, 12, 15 times before I finally got to Mr. Snerdley. And Mr. Snerdley is very gruff and intimidating on the phone. You have to stand your ground. Otherwise, he's going to say, no, we're not talking about this today, and hang up the phone. But if you were persistent, you could get through. And I think one of the first times I spoke with Rush was after we had moved to Gilmanton. And I said, he said, we have on the phone Dave from Gilmanton, New Hampshire. And I said, greetings from Peyton Place, which is where Grace Metalius was living when she wrote the novel Peyton Place. Well, he was thinking Peyton Place, the TV show, which was on when I was a kid. It wasn't. We couldn't watch it because it didn't have any educational content, according to Mom. But we wound up having a nice chat about that.
Wait, so you didn't get to watch Bugs
I didn't get
Bunny?
to watch. Well, Bugs Bunny was a little different. That
That's
was Saturday
pretty
morning cartoons. That was before Mom and Dad got
That
up.
had all the classic music and everything else. That was wicked educational.
I can tell you, folks, he was a genuinely kind and absolutely original man. He was. There was nothing fake or fraudulent about him. And as a physician, I knew what he was going through. Chemotherapy will kick your butt for several days, and then he would be back on, 4 or 5 days after his treatment week was over. And sounded wonderful. Almost sounded like there was nothing wrong.
Yeah, it was
but
amazing.
Then recently,
he would hide.
It's been almost
very
2
well.
weeks since he was on, and I noticed that they were saying, well, Rush is hoping to be back, tomorrow or 2 days, and then 2 days would go by and he wasn't back. And I thought, oh gosh, this is not a good sign. When you have stage 4 anything, it means it's spread to other organs, and humans are blessed with redundancy of organ function. That's why we can donate a kidney to somebody and still lead a completely normal life. But if those organs start getting replaced by cancer that's spread, eventually you're going to run out of functioning organs. And oftentimes the liver is the one that gets targeted by metastatic cancer, and then eventually you lose enough functioning liver that you can't clear the toxins your body creates. You start to get confused, you go into a coma, and I suspect that's probably what happened to our beloved Rush.
Yeah, he was a wicked cool guy. That's the other thing too, is this. 'Cause you mentioned Snerdley, because I listened to an interview with Snerdley quite a few years ago, and it's funny because the media tries to portray Rush as being racist and all this crap. What they don't know is the guy that Rush relied on the most was Snerdley, and he's a black guy.
He's African American, yeah.
Yeah, and he's wicked smart. He was.
That's not his real name, That's
sure,
that's
but
Rush's nickname for
But
him.
that's what it is. Oh,
Yeah.
But anyway, he loved Rush. He really loved him. He
they
had
had a
so
real
much
bond.
he had
a
so
real
much
bond.
respect for him. It was. He said I remember his interview. He says that guy just figures out so much. I don't know how he grasps all the different parts of the puzzle and puts them together so well. It's uncanny. But
I was on the phone today right at noon when the show came on, and so I didn't hear the opening of the show.
yeah.
And when I finally finished the phone call and tuned in, Rush was on. And then I got an email saying, a great radio icon has passed. And I thought, oh my gosh, this isn't him. This is a rebroadcast.
Yeah.
And I felt like a member of my family had died. I mean, that's that's how important this man was to our country. I mean, don't forget, folks, in 1994, he was so instrumental in the Republican takeover of the House of Representatives that they made him an honorary member of the freshman class of the House of Representatives in 1994. That's how much this man stimulated people and encouraged them to go forth with their civic duty and believe in America. And that's the one thing I'm going to miss the most about him, is his ability to really motivate people and defend our great country.
And he never really got down. He had a thing, anyone who's a regular listener would know that he never gave up and was never going to give up on America, on the American dream, on anything. I remember very early on in the show, somebody was giving him crap or giving Republicans crap about the 94 takeover, and this, the GOP in Congress, they were starting to wear American flag pens.
Yes.
That wasn't something that the media or Congress did through the 70s and 80s and whatnot. We come out of the Vietnam War, and the idea of patriotism and flag waving was shunned for a very long time.
Yeah.
And those of us who come from military families, who are lifelong conservatives, we never understood that hatred for veterans, for the military, and we started to come out of that a little bit during the Reagan years, right? We started to be more proud of ourselves. We started to see this great president doing great things, tearing down the Berlin Wall, telling Russia exactly where to go. Right. And then comes Rush right at the end of the Reagan years, and he gets on the radio and he carries that sentiment forward and even deeper. And I remember one particular show where this idea of patriotism was being panned by CNN and the media and whatnot. And Rush opened his show and he said, "Folks, there is nothing corny," as I've heard the word thrown out, he said, "there is nothing corny about waving the American flag." Right? Being patriotic on July 4th, there's nothing corny about it. You don't have to be embarrassed to wave the flag. And he wasn't going to give up on America, right? And when Clinton won the White House, people would call in and say, "Oh, Rush, what are we going to do? We had all this great conservative years with Reagan and Bush, and now Clinton's going to drag us down." And he says, "No, we're not going to give up." Right? And he had a phrase that he I'm sure we've all heard him say it. He says, "I will tell you when it's time to panic. It's not time to panic. We're not giving up on America."
No one should be ashamed for being a citizen of the greatest country in the history of this planet.
Yeah.
Think about the world wars that we helped to win. Think about every natural disaster, whether it's an earthquake or a tsunami that happens around the world. Who's there first?
America
we are.
is the
we
are.
only have like a minute or so.
I want to finish my thought, though.
No.
Right? So, cut it out. So he always said, and he's been saying it for literally decades. I've heard him say it 100 times. Every time something bad happened or something that, 9/11, folks, it's not time to panic. We're not giving up, right? Obama wins the White House. Folks, it's not time to panic. Affordable health care goes through, and prices go through the roof. It's not time to panic. Last year, through COVID, people are saying, Biden's going to win the White House. We got this COVID. We're very close to the Civil War. People are calling in. He says, "Folks, I've told you forever and ever, it's not time to panic. And I'm going to tell you a secret." And this is something he said, I think, in November or December of last year. He says, "I'm never going to tell you to panic, right? I've been teasing you for 30 years, telling you that I'm going to tell you when it's time to panic. And I'm telling you now," right? He's on his deathbed. "It's never time to panic. We're never going to give up on America."
we should all be blessed to have such faith
So
Yeah.
as he had.
I remember one of the I think it was one of his shows. It was one of the Democrats was going ballistic because I think it was Bush sent an aircraft after there was a disaster, I think in India. Bush sent an aircraft carrier in, and they're all, why are you sending military into, during a crisis like this? What are you, out of your mind? And it was like on Russia's show, he says, do you realize how much fresh water that aircraft can produce, and how many how much medical facilities are on that aircraft? He just went through the list of, explaining why the loony left is just so wrong on so many issues, but
Fresh water, hospital beds,
Everything.
manpower,
yeah. Dr. Strang, thank you very much, young man. It was a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you very much for the invitation.
Which Josh, right?
yeah,
Yeah, Josh. I'll see you next week, right?
You will see me.
I will
next
see
week.
you next. We'll see you guys.